All right, cool. Let's get rolling. Yeah, awesome. We're right on time. So, thanks for coming, everybody. Um, Glad you could make it. I know this is an awkward time. I feel bad, but it's really the only convenient time that I can do this consistently. So, thank you if you had to go out of your way to attend. Appreciate it. I've been told that I don't introduce myself when I do these webinars ever, so I'm gonna try to do a better job of that this time. I see a lot of familiar names in the list of people who are attending, so I kind of take for granted that I assume everyone knows who I am. But if you don't, my name's Chris. I'm that guy in the photo that you see right there. I labeled myself using the highlighter tool in GoToMeeting. Works really well. And I am your iGUIDE guru for today. I was a photographer, a professional photographer for many years before I picked up an iGUIDE camera, and I worked with the first system, and then now I'm working with the IMS5 system. I was responsible for sort of training everyone initially. I'm not in that role anymore, so I'm technically a marketing manager now. So my activities are more skewed toward marketing, but because I have so much knowledge and hands-on experience with the camera, often I still jump into that sort of training slash iGuide guru role. Anywho, you're going to see and hear me in pretty much every single promotional video that we have. So I'm the guy, probably 19 times out of 20, I'm the guy wandering around with the camera or just talking. Um, so yeah, that's me. I'm not saying I'm famous, but maybe a little. So today the setup is going to be very simple. I'm going to try to stay, within a pretty tight time limit. I'm going to talk for at least 30 minutes, maybe a little bit over, and then I'm going to open it up to questions. I'm also a little under the gun here because I'm on the third floor of my house, and apparently summer is here today. It's like sunny, and this room that I'm in right now is heating up. If I turn on my air conditioner, you won't be able to hear me. So I have a limited amount of time either way. But yeah, so I'll talk for 30 minutes and then I'll try to answer all your questions. Please put the questions in the chat and then I'll go skim through them. Honestly, once I get on a roll and I start talking, I probably won't look at them anyway. So if you put them there, I'll go in afterward and I'll make a point of going through each one. All right. So the last thing I need to mention, I was told to ask you this. Please like and follow and tag us on social media when you post, because we will share and like your posts. So I don't think we say this enough, so I'm going to try to do a better job of it. What that means is that if you post something and you tag us or you put in a hashtag that relates to us, like hashtag iGuide, we'll see that and we look for that. I don't. I say someone else more qualified does, but we'll see that and then we'll share your post and we'll like it so more people will see it. So please do that, and that's on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or whatever. All right, cool. So the topic of today's masterclass is speed and efficiency. So speed and efficiency can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So I'm going to give you my take on it and basically give you what is essentially my top 10-ish tips for achieving speed and efficiency. And I'll tell you why they matter and why I use them. So to start, I'm just going to bring up my list. There you go. So this is my only slide. I'll get rid of my name. Give me a second here. There we go. So tips for speed and efficiency. We're going to go through these one by one, and I'm going to try to keep track of the time and keep it sort of under the 35-minute mark. So tip number one, are you ready? Is ask for help. So when I show up at a house or a property, any property, doesn't have to be a house, and I need to get a job done, there's a whole lot of work involved. There's sort of a whole lot of tasks in that bigger job of shooting a property that I don't technically need to do. And if I can get out of doing them because I can get someone else to do them, I can save heaps of time, and you can too. So I'm going to give you a few examples, and then you can and then tell you how I do it. So if you can get, for example, the homeowners to turn all the lights on, that is supposing you shoot with all the lights on. Well, that can save you a few minutes right there. So, 3 minutes on a 30-minute shoot is a lot. That's 10% faster just by asking someone to go turn all the lights on for you. You can also ask people to move things. Obviously, in our current climate, if the house is empty, this doesn't make any sense, but typically there are people there, a listing agent or homeowners or whoever. So if there's nobody there, you're out of luck. But if there are people there, don't be afraid to ask them for help. So a few more examples. Moving objects. You shouldn't really be moving them yourselves anyway, I suppose. tweaking things in the environment so that they look good for photos, opening doors, things like that. So if you can ask people to do those things for you, you can save a significant amount of time. The benefit of asking a homeowner is that they know where everything is. So they know where all the light switches are, and they know where things go. So if they move things, it's on them to find them later. um, so the way that I approach this is I try to set the expectations at the front door. So as soon as I show up, or even before I've showed up, so you could certainly do this in the current, climate that we're in, before you show up, set your expectations. Say, look, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I need you to do to make that happen. So that's really important for anyone who's new. So if you're not really well-seasoned real estate photographer yet, you will be, no worries. But often the agents or people that you're working with, they don't really know what it is you're going to do when you go to the house. So they just guess. So that means the house might not actually be set up for you to shoot it yet, which is going to cost you a significant amount of time and hassle because you're going to have to set it up when you're there if you even can do that. So if you can set the expectation right at the front door or ahead of time on the phone that you're going to go through every single room in the entire property, that's important because you need to measure stuff with the iGUIDE. So that's weird spaces like utility spaces and closets and that kind of stuff. And when you photograph, you're going to be photographing in 360 degrees, which means no hiding things on one side of the room. You can't just move it around as you shoot. That goes a long way toward saving you time, when you're shooting, because that's stuff you won't be having to move around. The number one challenge that all photographers face across the world is that when they show up, the property's not quite ready yet. It's the number one irritation that everyone has. So best case scenario is that you talk to your client ahead of time, but if you can't do that, right at the front door, introduce yourself, say, hey, can I get you to go turn all the lights on? I need you to take all the blinds and fix them so that they face in the same direction. I need you to take all the pillows and move them or whatever, open up all the doors, and then kind of go from there. You can save yourself 5 or 6 minutes, which again, doesn't sound like much, but on a 30-minute shoot, that's like huge, right? When you are sort of shooting, it's okay. This is maybe a little controversial, but it's okay to be bossy. This is anecdotal, mind you. My personal opinion is that my clients like it when I take charge and I tell them what it is that I want, because then they appreciate I'm not asking for things that are unreasonable, right? This is just a certain level of professionalism that I'm bringing to it. I know what looks good and I know what I need to get the job done in a timely manner. So I just tell them, and you can too. So if you're brand new and you don't feel super assertive, don't worry, you'll get there, and it's okay to ask for that kind of stuff and be a little demanding. In fact, people often, kind of love it, which sounds weird, but it's true. Okay, so that's hot tip number one. Now we're going to get a little bit more technical. Obviously we're going to sort of dive into some of the shooting techniques or tips that I can give you. So the first one, I'm going to bring up my little sample training thing here, is don't wait for the preview. So what I mean by that is that when you shoot, you are going to see like preview images appear as you're shooting. You shoot it, and then typically what people do is they just wait and they look at their phone or their tablet and they just stand there. And that's fine, but you don't need to. You can keep moving. So I'm going to give you an example. I can't show you exactly what it will look like, but using this sort of interface you see on your screen, I'll sort of describe it. So you've got your little thumbnail images in the top left-hand corner. Those represent shots 1, 2, and 3. So in this image, you can see the first one is like it's completed, but the first one is squared off in green. So when you shoot that, it will not immediately appear. So I'll verbally describe this because I can't show it. I don't have a camera right now, but you push the shoot button. That looks like a camera. The camera's going to click 4 times, and then it's just going to sit there. Nothing's going to happen. So if you want, you can wait a few seconds and then the preview image will appear. But what I'm saying is there's no need to wait. Just rotate the camera clockwise and press the shoot button again before the images appeared. So every time I do a webinar or even talk to people about this stuff, I say you can shoot a panorama in somewhere between 16 and 20 seconds. But you have to just keep pressing the shoot button. If you're waiting for the preview, it's going to take much longer. And I know that sounds really simple, and a lot of you probably already do this, but just to reword that in a slightly different way, as soon as the shutter is done clicking, you can then rotate the camera and press the shoot button again. So as soon as you do, it will start clicking again because it's, it's doing exposures. And the image might not even appear, the first preview image might not even appear on screen by the time the second one's shot. And that's okay. If you actually look at the top of your camera, I'll use my little handy camera demo here. If you look at the top of the system controller, that big aluminum box, there's a little light. And when the camera's processing the HDR images, because that's what it's doing, it's the reason it's taking some time is that it's merging 3 or 4 images together. There's a little light and it'll be blinking. So while that light's blinking, you're free to rotate and shoot again. So this was a pretty big update that occurred, I don't know, last year maybe, year before, I forget now. And that really, it speeds up shoot time significantly. All right, cool. Yeah, don't wait for the preview. Just keep pressing that shoot button. The next one, auto exposure and auto white balance. So if you're not using auto exposure and auto white balance, I would encourage you to do so because it's just faster. It's way faster. It's a way better use of your time. The camera, basically auto white balance is a no-brainer. It does a better job than a human eye can do, in my opinion. So definitely do that. Auto exposure, my recommendation is use it every single time unless you have a really challenging situation. So if you've got a room that is entirely black, black paint, black carpet, it's a dark space, but it's not actually dark, it's just that the walls are black, then yeah, you might need to use your manual exposure. But for the most part, don't bother. The camera does a great job. If you find that the camera didn't do a good job, it's actually faster to shoot the pano twice than it is to adjust the exposure and then shoot the pano in some cases. Not all, depends on how fast you are. So auto exposure and auto white balance can save you, nothing huge, 2 or 3 minutes on a shoot. And that's, turning the live view on the back of the camera, looking at the exposure preview, adjusting the little clicky wheel. You don't need to do any of that, unless you've got some situation that the camera won't be able to handle. All right, so that one should be pretty cut and dry. The next one's a little nebulous. So I'm going to load up a demo here. I'm going to bring up Stitch. So really, the ideal for when you're shooting is to shoot panoramas that do 2 things. So that's, measure and photograph at the same time. Because if you have to shoot a panorama for each, one to measure and then one to photograph, you're spending twice the amount of time. So you want to be creating panoramas that do both things at once, essentially. So I'm going to pick one out. I guess we'll just use this big room. So this was a model home that I shot, and I did, I think, I did 2 panos in this big model room. I didn't really need to do that. I could have just done one. I think I just thought these floor plans were cool, so I thought I'd get closer to them. So rather than do one panorama on one side and one on the other, I could have just done one in the center. So 1 instead of 2. And there's going to be lots of situations where that may be the case. So when you are shooting any room, it's a good idea to sort of keep in mind or think about it in the sense that you don't want to do any more work than you have to, but you want to make an effective virtual tour and also measure the space. So you've got, a few competing priorities, right? But for the most part, there is almost always one really good pano that will cover, everything. We often talk about do more panos, go shoot more closets, create extra panoramas for kitchens, and there's no limit to the number of panoramas you create. That's common language I use all the time. And it means people shoot more, and that's fine. But the kind of tour you create is up to you. So if you think that one panorama in the center of a room is good enough for your tour, and it also happens to capture all the data to measure that space, that's it. You don't need anything else. You don't need to create more unless you've got a good reason to do it. So I'm going to give you another example. I've got one right here. So this is almost like the opposite of what I just said, but it involves shooting a panorama and then shooting another panorama right on top of it. So we're going to call this stacking panoramas. So there are some times where you can't do one perfect panorama. That was actually a good segue. I'm glad I did it that way. One perfect panorama wouldn't make sense. So you guys can probably see this. This is the sort of foyer area of a house. You can see it in the preview. And the closet door is closed. So rather than move the camera to save time, I stacked 2 panoramas on top of each other. So I don't know if that's actually visible. Oh yeah, you can kind of see that, right? You've got 2 panoramas, one with the door closed and one with the closet door open. So rather than pick up the camera, so I shot the foyer, I thought, oh, that looks nice, but look, I've got this closet over here. I should probably measure this. Rather than pick up the camera and move it over physically to the closet and reset it back up, I just opened the closet door and shot the exact same panorama a second time. Stacking panoramas is awesome. Basically, you can stack as many as you want in one spot, and the cost for time is just the cost to shoot. You don't have to, pay the price for walking over and placing the camera and kicking the tripod legs out and making sure it's set up. It's already done. So that's a really fun trick that you can use to capture things like closets. So let's suppose you've got a hallway or any room where there's a closet you want to measure. Just put your panorama in front of the closet door for the tour, and then go open the closet door and shoot a second panorama to get the closet. So it saves you a little bit of time. Again, this is like 2 minutes you're going to save on a shoot, but on a 30-minute shoot, that's a significant amount of time, especially when you add it to the other things that I just suggested. You can stack as many panoramas as you want on top of each other. Nothing wrong with that. The downside is that later you have to pick one. You have to pick one that you want to keep to show. So the rest will all be kept. They all get stored, but basically we don't know which one is the right one to show sometimes, so we require you to do it. And there's actually a warning in Stitch that I'm sure everyone or most people have seen at this point that says your panoramas are too close together. I think it's greater than or less than 50 centimeters or something. Make sure you've disabled all the ones but the one that you want. So that's why you get that message. It's because we're telling you you need to pick one because we don't know which one is the right one. So if you've got 5 panoramas on top of each other, the first one might be good and the remaining 4 might, be with closet doors open and have ugly things in them. Who knows? So when you're stacking panoramas, it's a good idea to make sure that you really, get exactly what it is that you need without moving the camera at all. That can be very helpful because that's where you save the time. All right, how are we doing for time here? Let's check. Oh, we're good. Okay. So the next tip, hot tip number, whatever we're on, 5, HDR on versus off. So let's go back to my demo here. So in the survey interface, you have an HDR preset selector. So the actual HDR brackets are displayed in the top right-hand corner. And just so we're all on the same page, HDR with respect to this camera system means shooting 3 images. I think it's middle, under, over. And then combining those 3 images on camera to give you something that shows both the highlights, so detail in something like windows or light fixtures, and in the shadows, so details in things like dark furniture. So that's, like I said, it's all done on camera, but that requires multiple exposures. That's why the camera clicks away a bunch of times. So this preset selector allows you to change or sort of rotate through or choose rather a preset that suits the situation that you're in. And if you look when you change it, you'll see the bracket values in the top right hand corner, that -5 EV and +2 EV. That basically will change to reflect whatever you've selected. So this is the best tip I can give you, especially for spaces that are big and ugly. Just turn the HDR off. If you turn it off, you can shoot as fast as the camera can click and your arms can move. It's awesome. You can shoot a panorama in like 6 seconds. So you would use this for things like closets, and you would use it for pantries, and you'd use it for storage rooms. And if you look at the number of panoramas that you actually show on a tour, what you're going to see is that a significant percentage of those panoramas no one's ever going to see. And also, often they don't have any windows in them anyway. Like in the basement, there might be a tiny window in the corner, but if it's an unfinished basement, why shoot it in HDR? There's no point. There is one exception to this, and that's where the details are important. So if you're shooting a larger property for the purposes of facility management, yes, it's not for marketing, but those details are relevant. So like pipes and wires and things like that. So you may want to do that. For real estate, it doesn't make any difference. If you've got an unfinished basement or a closet or a pantry or a utility room, just turn the HDR off. You don't need it. So don't waste your time. And when you shoot with HDR off, you'll know, because instead of doing the multiple clicks, per shot, it'll just click once and the image will instantly appear. So when I said wait for the preview earlier, there is no waiting here. The preview just instantly comes up. It's very cool and very snappy. And once you start, you're going to hate shooting HDR from then on, because it's awesome to not shoot in HDR. All right, cool. Next tip, again, visible here. Monitor your progress. So using the iGUIDE camera is highly repetitive and in some cases, depending on your taste, a little bit boring. So what happens is sometimes you settle into a rhythm and you don't really think too much about what you're doing. You just repeat the same process over and over again. And it often kind of makes your brain turn off, if that makes any sense. This happens more in larger properties, or if you've done like 5 shoots that day, you're not even really thinking. But if you're monitoring your progress, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a second, you can notice if you're moving too slowly or too fast or whatever. So I'll tell you how to do it. In the bottom right-hand corner of the survey, kind of control screen, it will tell you in text, and you can see it on my example here. It says test 900 for some reason for the project, and then main floor for the floor, and then pano number 2. So when you're shooting, you'll always know what pano you're on because they're all just numbered. So as you move throughout the property, you can do pano 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So a good sort of rule of thumb is about 1 pano per minute. So if you've shot 5 panoramas and you've been at the house maybe 5 to 10 minutes, okay, that's pretty normal, right? You have to like set up the camera and introduce yourself and stuff, or open the lockbox or whatever. But if you're on pano 5 or 6 and you've been there for 30 minutes, okay, well, something happened. What happened? So that just by knowing that, it gives you the opportunity to either speed up, slow down, or modify your behavior in some way. If you have another shoot coming up, you might want to do that. But it's very helpful when you're around halfway through a shoot and you're kind of thinking to yourself, oh my God, how long have I been here? Like, am I done yet? You can look down there and get an instant report on your progress. You can say, oh, look, I've done 37 panos. That's why I'm getting tired. That makes sense. And you can, whatever you want to do with that information, you do with that information. So you can speed up or slow down if you want to take your time. It really depends on what you have to do afterward or how badly you want to have lunch. All right. How are we doing for time? Okay, we're good. Next hot tip, align your data after. So aligning the data from one panorama to the next is what we recommend because before you leave the property, you can see what you've got. So here, I'll just load something up in Stitch here. So the data on screen, perfectly aligned. So if I align this on site, when I get home, this is what I see. Fantastic, I'm done. But there are some times when you kind of want to push work done on site to later when you get home because you're in a hurry. And that's really the ideal scenario, is when you can dynamically change how you're doing things, your workflow to suit the situation. So I'll give you an example. I've got a shoot at 9 a.m. and I have another shoot at 10. And my agent has assured me that the 9 a.m. shoot is so easy. It's like nothing. You're going to be done in like 20 minutes. And for some weird reason, I believe them. I'm like, yes, okay, cool. But then you get there and it's a train wreck and it is not an easy shoot. So for whatever reason. So rather than align data on site, what I might do is something that will give me this. So this is terrifying. But when you shoot all your panoramas just one on top of each other, what happens is they look like this. It's a spaghetti factory. And there's technically nothing wrong with this, although it may scare you. So when you're shooting, instead of using your, the sort of the data as you're shooting as your guide to whether you've captured everything, you have to use your brain. But if you can do that, you can save, again, like 5 or 6 minutes on a shoot, because often what happens is you spend a lot more time standing there trying to line up the data than you think you are. So what happens typically is that you go in a logical sequence throughout the house, which you were going to do anyway, and you shoot the house very much like if you were going to shoot still pictures. You just go into a room and then you shoot it, and then you leave that room and you go to the next, and you just kind of monitor your own progress in your head. So if you can do that, again, we don't recommend that you do that all the time, but if you can do that, you can save a significant amount of time and maybe get to your next shoot on time. So that messy shoot at 9 means you won't be late for your shoot at 10. And that's just like right now, that's critical because you're going to have a cascade failure of all your shoots if you are really late at the first one. That's like the worst case scenario, The first shoot takes an extra 45 minutes and then you have to call every single client for all the rest of your shoots, especially if they're all different clients. That is just awful to deal with. Okay, so we're getting toward the end here. One of the last ones that I want to say is pretty important is when you're shooting, don't fuss too much over details. So this is different for everybody, as it depends on your abilities, but I'll give you a few simple examples. Don't worry too much about floor names. You can change it later in Stitch. Don't worry too much about making sure the alignment is perfect. Again, you can fix it in Stitch, so don't worry about it. Don't worry too much about messed up panos. So if you accidentally kick the tripod halfway through a pano, don't worry about it. Just forget about it. Press +1, shoot it again. When you make a mistake, just move on quickly. Don't worry too much about reflections. A lot of people try to work really hard to hide the camera and try to stay out of the reflections. My advice to you is get good at editing, because then you don't have to worry so much about it. Like, it's frustrating to have to edit the images later, but it's very nice to know that you can. So that when you come across a situation where you have like a weird bathroom that's all edge to edge mirror and there's no hiding, you don't have to fuss over it. You can just put the camera down and say, okay, well, I've got some editing later, no big deal. There are a lot of little fiddly details that you can fix later. Actually, the biggest one would be what's a floor and what's not. So often in split level homes, you're going to have these weird layouts where you have like one level when you walk in the foyer, and then it's going to go up 5 steps to another level, and then up 5 more to another level, and there's like 7 floors in the house. But it's really just a 2-story house. So you can configure floors and buildings and rooms later in Stitch. So a good example is over here. You can see main floor is connected to this building. I can right click on the building. You guys can see that, and choose add a floor. And I can just add an extra floor and drag Panos over to it. So if I make a mistake on site and I think, oh, you know what? That really should have been the 3rd floor. No big deal. You can just fix it in Stitch. Easy. So I forgot to show you guys something. When you are, if you decide to go this route with the not aligning data, the auto align features in Stitch are like your best friend. So if I click arrange all scans, then I click yes to all, and then just wait patiently, basically the software puts it all together for you. So that is, pretty cool. That means you didn't have to do any of the work. So not only did you save work on site, but you also saved work. You didn't have to do the work when you got home as well. All right, cool. My last point before I start diving into the questions is even though this whole this whole topic is about speed and efficiency, speed and efficiency are not the only thing that matters. So don't sacrifice the quality of the product that you're making for speed and efficiency. So when people, especially when people first start, so if you've just begun, you just got your camera, don't worry too much about speed and efficiency, to be honest. No one is going to judge you on how fast you are for the most part, not right away anyway. It's the quality of the iGUIDE and your still photos and your video and whatever else you're making, they're going to judge you on. So even though I just told you a bunch of ways you should speed up and move faster, take it with a grain of salt, or consider the situation that you're in before you do it. So I'm going to give you an example. I've got a shoot at 9 and I have another shoot at 1. I'm not in any hurry, right? I'm not in any hurry at all. So I'm not going to try to move fast. I'm going to take my time, and I'm going to maybe try and enjoy myself, When you move too quickly, often you make mistakes. So it's better to sort of take what I said earlier and try to make good habits out of it rather than try to move really fast. I mean, you can try to speed shoot if you want, but it's more about having a flexible and dynamic workflow so that when you have more shoots in a day, you can accommodate that. My theory was always like, well, I want to make more money. So if I can shoot more properties, or at least shoot them more easily, then I can either offer to shoot more properties in addition, or I can offer other services and I can fit them in. So when you go to a property and you're going to do like a virtual tour and floor plans and still photos, and then all of a sudden you want to get more out of that shoot, well, how about video? Well, you need time to do that. So if you're spending a lot of time shooting the iGUIDE, okay, well, where's that time going to come from? So you can save some if you sort of get a little bit more efficient. It's probably what I'm getting at. All right, cool. So I'm going to dive into the questions now. Looks like we got a few. It's pretty awesome. Keep adding them, please, as we go. Hold on. Okay, I already answered that one. Awesome. Oh yeah, Memorial Day weekend's coming up for you guys. We already had our holiday last weekend. Oh, it's very candid of you, Peter, saying you don't follow this list. I know, yeah, I don't either. Sometimes I break all these rules, but whatever. I I honestly, I don't like to admit this, but I will help move stuff. If I need to get the job done, like I don't want to throw money away. So sometimes I'm just like, okay, here, let me help you move that, right? And I've hilariously broken many things, which I'll actually come back to in a minute because it relates to the possible topic of our next webinar. Hi, Chris. Where's the auto white balance setting? Excellent question. I will show you. So right here on the survey interface, there is a drop down that says auto. So if you tap on that, you're going to see a list of white balance presets. Don't use them. Leave it on auto. It's awesome. The only time you would use it on one of those presets is if you have a situation that is truly weird. So when you're there, the camera just cannot figure it out. That's rare, but it's usually mixed lighting. You can have some really strange effects, like you've got under counter LEDs and you've got tungsten overheads over the island, and you've got like a huge window and it's got natural light coming from the outside, and that mix is just like light throw up, and it's really hard to deal with. Closets, partial panos. Okay, I'll explain partial panos and the reason I didn't bring them up. So I don't tremendously like partial panos. I don't see them having as much value as they used to. So a panorama used to take, I don't know, like not exactly a minute, a little under a minute to shoot because you had to wait for the camera to process the image, and it felt like it took an eternity. But now it's so fast, like 16 to 20 seconds. So just so people know, in case you're not familiar. So it makes more sense to do a whole pano rather than a partial. But a partial pano is when you just point the camera in one direction, tap the shoot button, and that's it. You just move on. So what you'll end up getting is you'll get 1/3 of a panorama, and you'll get 1/3 of the measurement data captured during a panorama. So in theory, you think, oh, that's awesome. That would be so great for things like closets and cupboards and whatever. And you know what? It's not bad. Like, it's not the worst thing. It's fine. But it doesn't give you any data from behind you. So that means connecting it to the rest of the data can be a bit more challenging. Because it only takes a few extra seconds to shoot the full panorama, I'm just going to recommend that you shoot the full panorama. Partial panoramas are dangerous, especially when you try to communicate it to someone else. Because often they misinterpret that as being like, oh, okay, so if a space doesn't matter, I'll just shoot the one part and not the whole thing. And then you end up getting people doing one partial panorama for a whole like bedroom, because maybe the bedroom was messy and it doesn't need to go on the tour, and they think, well, I don't need a whole panorama, and then we can't draw it because we can't figure out where that thing goes because there's not enough data. So my official advice: don't use partial panoramas unless you're a real hotshot. Just do the full panorama. It's much easier and significantly safer. Partial panoramas really shine for really goofy things like cupboards and stuff on really tiny closets. All right, when you stack a panorama to measure a closet, does the shot that you're making for the closet have to be 3? Yeah, just trust me, just do all 3 shots. Don't do just one. Often, there's other reasons why that's handy. If you get in the habit of doing partial panoramas, you're gonna regret it. You're gonna wish you didn't, because often those panoramas are valuable for other weird reasons. For landings on stairs, is it better in Stitch to include pano data with respect to lower, higher floor? That's a good question. So panoramas on stairs are completely optional. So if you're doing them, don't stop. You don't need to. That's a waste of time. However, sometimes they look cool, right? Like if there's a really nice stairwell and you like that there's a panorama on there, then yeah, go for it. They're not required, and what floor you put them on is completely up to you. It really depends, I suppose, on the view. So I guess, for example, let's suppose I have a stairwell that goes up, turns almost 180 degrees, and then continues up to the second floor. If it's like an open concept space and that landing happens to have a view of the first floor, I'll put it on the first floor. If it's completely enclosed and all you can see is really the second floor, all right, I'll put it on the second floor. So it's up to you. It's wherever you want to put it. That is your call. The only time where it's required that you do a panorama on stairs is when there's some detail that needs to be captured in terms of a measurement, like for square footage. So if you've got a landing that bumps out of a house a couple feet for some weird reason, there's an overhang or something, then we wouldn't know that that exists unless you measure it. So that's one instance where you absolutely have to do it. All right, next question. You're on fire, Remy. For detached or semi-detached that don't require exterior measurements, should we be using 0 value for wall thickness? Yeah, just don't put it in. So basically, you don't need to put in 0. Just don't put in anything. If you don't put anything in for wall thickness, what's going to happen is that the exterior area will just not be reported. It just won't be there. And that's ideal because then someone won't mistakenly use it to list a property that's, attached or semi-detached. All right, next question. These are good questions. More often, it's getting slower when you click the +1 button to create generate next panel. Oh, okay. So this could be a lot of things. This happens from time to time. Yes, it could be your phone. It's not the camera. That hasn't changed really. But it can also be Wi-Fi interference. So I've probably mentioned this, what, 3 webinars straight? Wi-Fi interference is horrible, and you won't know it's a problem until it's a problem. And it's like once every 50 houses you're gonna have this problem. But I'm gonna tell you all how to fix it so you all know. Wi-Fi interference literally means when you're shooting, and this is a good speed and efficiency thing because this thing can really throw you. It costs you a lot of extra time. When you're shooting, you may press buttons and nothing happens. And you're kind of like, what's going on? Is this my phone? And Wi-Fi interference could be the culprit. So Wi-Fi interference means that you're on channel 6 for the connection between your smart device and the camera, and someone else is on channel 6 and they're streaming, something on Hulu, and there's some interference there, and so it's causing some difficulty for your phone to communicate with the camera. So button presses will work, but sometimes they take a few tries, right? And sometimes you tap something and nothing happens, and then it happens after a few seconds. So the way you fix that is you go to the Manage tab in Survey, scroll down to where it says Wi-Fi channel, and switch the channel to a different one. The camera will restart, you reconnect, and you continue on as normal. It's most common to have this happen in areas with a lot of traffic. So you're in a townhouse complex and every single person has a router and they're all at home right now watching Netflix. So that could be an issue. The other issue, I've just gotten really vague reports about this, so this could be completely inaccurate, but I have heard some talk about iPhone screen sensitivity issues that relate, and they're not just for the camera app, they're for like anything in Safari. So I have no fix for that. If anyone knows how to change the screen sensitivity on an iPhone, please share. So that could be it, but again, that's just anecdotal information. When you're measuring a patio space, do you need 2 panels, one at eye level for visuals, another one with camera drop down so the laser hits the patio walls, or can the drafter choose one at eye level? All right, that's an excellent question, Leroy. So sometimes yes, sometimes no. There's no easy answer for that. So what the drafters are doing when they're looking at panoramas is they're trying to identify things in the images. So when you're outside of a property, if the camera's at eye level, there will be no laser data. And there isn't for a patio anyway, because it doesn't have a boundary, right? If it's a deck, it might have a railing, but a patio is just a rectangle on the ground. So if they can see the rectangle on the ground, you're good. You can do one at eye level. You don't have to lower the camera. But if they can't see the edge of that patio, you may have to work a little harder by, say, lowering the camera or moving the camera off of the patio to show it from the side. If they can't identify where the boundary or edge perimeter of that patio is, they won't draw it in. So how you get them that data depends on how obstructed it is, like where if you can actually see the edges or not, and if you've got any laser data. So the example, if there's a wall or a railing, then 100% lower the camera down so that the laser hits it. If you can see that laser data, a nice rectangle that shows the deck railing, then the drafters can too. The thing with exterior elements is that we can't guarantee that we can draw them in. So if you want them drawn in, which you do because they look really cool, you have to work a little harder for them, and you have to think a little more. Like, will the drafters be able to draw this in from what I've given them? And if the answer is no, at least then they can give you a why. They can say, look, we didn't. You thought we had the data, but when we actually look at it, we didn't. And then that can start a conversation to allow you to be able to get that data in the future. Next question. Editing panoramas. Where can you find those instructions? Good question. There's a knowledge base article for that. So I'll briefly describe that right now. I did a webinar on editing Panos, but I think that was 3 or 4 webinars ago. But yeah, all the images created by the iGUIDE camera are fully editable. That means that anytime there's an unwanted reflection in a mirror, TV screen, whatever, you can edit that out in Photoshop or Lightroom or whatever your Photoshop equivalent is. When you are shooting, it's very convenient to know you can do that, because often you're going to get in trouble from your client for things that you didn't immediately notice on the shoot. So, if there's a coffee mug on the table or there's a set of business cards somewhere, and you can edit all that stuff out too. which is kind of awesome. So it's very comforting to know that you can still get really good results even if the environment isn't 100% perfect. All right, when shooting outside, where is it? Backyard of the house, the laser be turned off or on? That's a really good question. Everyone's been asking me this lately, I guess because it's warming up. So my advice is leave the lasers on when you shoot outside. You don't have to worry. The drafters you're not going to get charged for drawing the outside of the property. We only charge you for drawn interior like spaces. That's what the billable area is made up of. If you leave the lasers on, you can then have the option of positioning that panorama exactly as you would an interior one. So that means you line it up just like you would any other room. And then later on the tour, the dot that represents that particular panorama will appear in its approximate position outside of the floor plan, signifying that that's a point of view that you can get from outside of the house. And it seems to work very well. So always leave the lasers on unless you've got a really good reason not to. If you turn them off, it's fine. It'll still work. But if you leave the lasers on, it makes your life easier. So can we leave auto white balance on for outdoor photos? Heck yeah, always leave auto white balance on. Leave it on auto and never think about it ever again for the rest of your iGUIDE career. The auto white balance is flawless, in my opinion. I've never really had it mess up. And even in situations where it wasn't perfect, it was better than what I could do. I can admit that. The machines are taking over. Next. Oh, partial panos. Yeah, Carmel, we could talk about that. Yeah, they're not necessary. What they are is a way of capturing extra data that you might not already be doing. So my official recommendation of capture full panoramas doesn't necessarily invalidate capturing partial panoramas. If you're already doing it, just keep doing it. It's fine. But the full panoramas are better by virtue of the fact that they have more data associated with them and they cost very little time for that. Can you request existing furniture on location be drawn at the floor plans desk? No, we won't do that. However, we do have an integration coming up that will allow you to customize floor plans with that stuff. So that's coming up very soon. Everyone who's on the forum, I think, probably has already seen it, but we have an integration coming up with floorplanner.com. So you can basically take our floor plans and for like a couple dollars, you can export them to Floor Planner. You can pay more if you want. They've got all sorts of packages and stuff. I won't spoil the fun of the launch, but you can send your iGUIDE floor plans over there, and then you can add furniture. It's really simple. You just like click and drag it over. You can add couches and desks and all sorts of wacky stuff. Actually, the best part about that is that there's like an editor version, so you can dynamically do it. So it's not like you do it once and export it and you're finished. You can do it as many times as you like. It's really fun. A little bit nerdy, but it is pretty fun. iPad goes from landscape to portrait view and then back to landscape again. Not going to see the whole screen. Okay, so if your device is flip-flopping between landscape and portrait, go to settings. See you later, Leroy. Oh, he's gone. That's fine. If you are finding that your device is flip-flopping back and forth, go to settings and basically you're going to find something called rotation lock. I have no idea what it's called. Someone else will probably know. Put it in the chat. What that's called on an iPad, but you can lock the rotation to be in a specific orientation, whatever it is that you want. Can the laser selection be turned on by default? No, it can't, unfortunately. That would be super cool, but we're not. We don't have that ability yet. Maybe one day, if enough people ask. Go put that in the feature suggestions. Okay, if that's all the questions, then we're all done. We're going to call it there. We're right on time. That's perfect. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day and have a great long weekend if you're in the United States. Cheers.